everyone. This is Shadow Radio here again. How are my favorite keyboard clackers? We have a great show for you today. A little bit of change. We're going to take out some of the news segments and we're going to make a little bit of a different genre here today because we have a 2-hour interview with someone who's very important to our group and to information security, and of course to iPredator. We have Dr. Nuccitelli here on a 2-hour interview without commercials because we have such a great, interesting topic here talking about thought crimes and information security. And I would like everyone to know that this show was in fact recorded prior to the technical problems of the New York Stock Exchange and of course that airline with technical problems. So, and as we've recorded the show, the day later, those two instances of technology problems occurred. And of course, they say it's tech problems, but I think all of us know that that was probably a hacking. You know, we're not going to say anymore. Nobody likes to have conjecture, but we all know what really happened, as opposed to what's being released in the news. So. Without further ado, we have Dr. Nuccitelli here talking about creator of the iPredator construct, mentioned by Dr. Sam now. So we know, I think it's on page 62. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, but Nuccitelli here, one of the coming up greatest. I think he's way ahead of his time when it comes to discussing, you know, his iPredator construct and stuff. And as my partner, I have to kind of let everyone know that what he does is so intertwined with information security and technology that I think the melding of these two things kind of benefit everybody. So without further ado, let's move on to that. You're listening to Shadow Radio, and here we go, that 2-hour interview. So grab your coffee, grab your cat, put it on your lap, and grab some other things, whatever you might need, your Jolt Cola, and listen on. Here we go. We're here with Shadow Radio here. This is Dr. Nuccitelli. Of course, we're going to have a nice interview today. We have some good topics that we're going to discuss today. How you doing?
Oh, to me? Oh, good evening.
Yeah, to you.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to your listeners for whenever they listen to this. And look forward to a great discussion and hopefully educational regarding to you know, the documentary we're going to talk about, Thought Crimes, which we'll talk about a little bit shortly.
Yeah,
very incredible.
Absolutely. And I know you have some thank yous to send out too, and I want to hear them.
Yeah, most certainly. And this goes out, and this is from both Shadow and myself. I first want to say thank you and welcome Ms. Tammy Stefano. She's out of California. And actually, both Shadow and I will be working with her. And she runs the National Safe Child Show. She also has her own internet radio show every Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern. And for anybody that's interested, she deals with parents, families, dads, moms, people that are dealing with the family court system and dealing with all the troubles that the judicial system, you know, puts folks through when it goes to child visitation. And then she's also has expertise in human trafficking, pedophiles, child pornography, and basically...
And one might ask, and let me interject, and one might ask, what does this have to do with InfoSec? But then again, everything's transmitted over data now. How do you think this stuff is happening? Over the waves of the internet. So, you know, this is how we track it, you know.
Exactly, and you are, and when you say how does it, you being a key component to this new triad, yourself, me, and then Ms. Stefano, and then hopefully that'll grow, is that, and this goes back to, and particularly for your InfoSec listeners, I've said this from the beginning, and gosh darn it, I will one day, I believe InfoSec experts should be working and should be employed by the general population. Not just, constricted to, you know, typical information security accounts and people presently. I think it should be anybody from the community should know to contact an InfoSec professional if they get targeted in cyberspace for any reason.
Absolutely.
And wouldn't that be good for the InfoSec industry?
Well, not only be good for the infosec industry, I think it would be good for our own government too, because we have a lot of people out there, who have no idea what they're doing with technology.
Right, and I agree with you, Sha, and not to push my agenda, but you're the same too, and I'm not going to sit here, but you know as well as I do, both of us, as well as Stefano, we also have a special spot for children. It's trying to create a cyberspace that is reasonably safe for children to go on without, automatically having to be alarmed and alerted to online sexual predators, your nasty internet trolls, and now we're seeing more and more your pedophiles and your sexual predators that are looking for webcam and images for children so that they can push and merchandise on the online child pornography market. And it's just absolutely, it's disgusting.
See, the problem is with the new exploits, they can turn on the camera and do the hardware exploits now without their user's knowledge. So, you get... your kid goes on to the computer just to do some research or something, and little to you have a computer in your bedroom or something, and people are spying on you. That's absolutely unacceptable. We're going to put a stop.
And then you also have another piece, as you and I often
now
discuss,
remember, wait a second. Remember that these things were built in. These activities were built in by the manufacturers. Understand that.
So what do you, if you could, remember for the listener, what do you mean by built? I know what you mean, but what do you mean by built in?
Well, I mean, when you want to target a company, it all comes back to the point of how much money can we get from this person, It always comes back to that, because how much information can we get from this person? Once we have this, we can create a psychological profile, we can do this. Now we know how to target him that's going to react to him to, further influence him to buy. And then that comes into, thought, now controlling thoughts by,
That's some good stuff, which we're going to get into when you talk about controlling thoughts. So if I may, let me just quickly finish with the shout-outs. So, we once again, Shadow and I are honored to have Tammy Stefano to be working with us together. We see a fruitful future. I also want to say thank you from Shadow and I, and I'm just going to use their Google Plus names. It's Alpha Tina Conley and Rhino Warrior Pinkie Pie. Those two are two young ladies who, God bless them, they volunteer their time, and they head up two of our Google Plus communities called kä and ďଈ. And those two communities all volunteer, made up of Google Plus members who volunteer their time. kä goes out and identifies, targets, tracks, reports internet trolls, cyber stalkers, cyber bullies, and those engaging in hardcore pornography that they're distributing. And then ďଈ specifically focuses on pedophilia, and God, it's the worst of the worst, which we're hopefully can talk about a little because it's just mind-blowing, is online child pornography and the distribution of.
Right. Now, let me hold on for a second there, because I know that everybody is going to be yelling for me to say this. I mean, child pornography, of course, yeah, we can't have that. But I mean, you're saying regular pornography, like hardcore pornography, you can't have that on there. Well, I have to interject and say that, you know, if it's adult age, you have to, you have to allow those kinds of things. You know.
Oh yeah, and as you know, because you're an owner of you're an owner of kä, is in our member guidelines, and every now and then we have to, particularly, because some of the new members will, post and say report and block, like moderate pornography, if there is such a thing, or scantily clad nude women, which, that would fall under erotica, and we don't report block or track. It's only, as it relates to straight pornography, it's hardcore. Where it's GIFs or mini videos or images of a woman, spread eagle or has something in her mouth, if I may, So that is the only thing that we report as it relates to kä. ďଈ is specifically designed to focus on online child pornography and pedophilia. And I was hoping tonight, I know we're talking about thought crimes, but if we can, is to maybe discuss or educate listeners, particularly the listeners who have children out there, about, you know, what's going on in Google+. And because, I mean, it's amazing how much there is that on a daily basis that we're seeing reporting, tracking, and it's as if Google Plus is not doing something about it.
Yeah,
and
you can't.
It amazes me.
Yeah, you can't come on here and just give your children, just a free reign here. This is it can be dangerous, and there's.
Yeah, but one of the things I don't understand, and once again, we'll get into this because it's what I don't understand, Shadow, is Google is looking. I don't know if they have, surpassed Twitter yet in terms of, multitudes of members. I'm pretty sure they have, and they're looking to eventually surpass Facebook. So be it. But I just can't understand, and I was even going to do an open source letter, and I still plan on writing where I send it is somewhere out in California to Google, to ask them why or if they're doing something. Because it's just amazing the amount of child pornography that we're seeing, and it's amazing that how they're able to make profiles from the beginning is amazing, and it's just, I'm speechless. I mean, I am so used to, as somebody who's been doing this now for 4 years, thinking that most child porn, is passed around, sold, exchanged, like baseball cards in Darknet or Usenet, the other internet. But here we see it's right here on Google+.
Yeah, that's something we have to take a step against, and we've taken steps to try to combat that issue. But yeah, I understand where you come from there, Dr. Nuccitelli.
And that is another thing that I see where InfoSec down the road can get involved. Obviously there'd have to be a private or federal budget to where InfoSec experts and professionals are trained to go out and to identify and then bring them to justice. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is bringing them to justice. Because what happens, Shadow, as you know, we get their profiles, canceled once they're identified, which I keep track, and we're at about a 40 to 45% success rate. So that, when we report, block, and then we go back and check, they are removed. But what does the pedophile do, or the child porn merchant do?
So
just create another one.
Create another name, yeah, I understand.
And that is the hardest part. And I enjoy Google+. I enjoy all the free services, but that is the one sticking point. And what's bothersome, and I still don't understand, when we set up ďଈဍΗ, which we set up, and then it was public. Within 10 days of us, starting to track and doing a volunteer service to essentially help, guess what? It gets suspended. And obviously, as listeners who have Google+, there's no way to find out. They're all, when you get suspended, is remove the content. So I removed, I went back, I think at the time, I went back 2 weeks, removed all the content, and waited 4 days, and it still wasn't reactivated. So what I did is, Rhino Warrior canceled out, deleted ďଈဍΗ, and then I made another community, ďଈဍΗ, but I made it private. Because it's believed that, it's only conjecture, is that pedophiles or child porn merchants, enough of them got together to complain for whatever reason, and Google Plus suspended our ďଈဍΗ community.
Well, it stands to reason. If you get a bunch of group of people and to make a determination to close an account or to suspend an account, when it's automated and you have a large group, you can take control over simple things like that.
Do you think, Shadow, it's automated to where there's an automated response, or so it's not like there's a real person that actually looks at the?
Well, as a programmer, I mean. goodness, I can't, as a programmer, as a developer, I can't see that them not putting that in there. I would be flabbergasted if they did not put that kind of code in there. That it will give you the option, So
do you think that the reason why ppe, the first one, because it was public, was suspended was because because I can only think that child porn merchants and pedophiles would be the ones to complain.
No, I think it's automated. No, I think that they got a bunch of people and it was automated. And I think there's a certain fraction of users or a certain amount of users or requests that when you get to send in can suspend an account, to with certain keywords or whatever.
That's interesting. Well, see, once again, that would be excellent for an InfoSec professional to get involved with, because that's wrong. Particularly whether it's us, whether it's anybody who's trying to do a good volunteer service for the community, they get suspended without any justification and without any notice other than the account has been suspended.
Well, that's the day and age we live in, modernization, efficiency. So, what are we going to do? Are we going to pay a person to sit there? That comes back to my whole thing of money I hate, It comes back to that.
Yeah,
you can never get rid of it. You can never get rid of it,
Well, for those of you out there, the listeners, anybody is always welcome to join Kane and ppe. And obviously, Shadow has got a wonderful information security community. And I think last time I checked, Shadow, you're up to, like 8,700 members?
Yeah, 8,000 something, 8,900, I think. I don't know.
Goodness gracious, God bless you.
Yeah.
So for the listeners out there that, have knowledge or are students of, please visit Shadow's information security community, because they put out a lot of great information. I don't understand 3/4 of it, but for those of you that are either students or studying InfoSec, that is an excellent resource to learn a lot of information about the industry. And before we move on to Thought Crimes, I also, related to Rhino Warrior, Kane, and Alphatina, I want to give a shout-out to Matimba and Little G. And those are two, and any listener can go for free. You go to Africam, that's Africam.com, and Shadow, I'm sure you think it's ridiculous, but, I have a heart for animals. Matimba and Little G are two orphaned rhinos, because apparently, the black rhino, the white rhino are on the extinction checklist because their horns are used for aphrodisiacs out in Asia. So what happens is the poaching is incredible out in South Africa and Africa. They go out, they kill the mother, cut off the horn, and leave the orphan, baby rhino there. So anybody can go to Africam.com, and for free is on live webcam. You can see Little Matimba and Little G. So shout out to them, and God bless the rhinoceros.
Only humans, right? Only man would do something silly as that, To hunt a species to extinction is illogical, to quote one of the greatest quotes of ever, in Star Trek, I
was just going to say, you sound just like Spock when you say illogical. It is amazing, And when you think about it, it's bad enough that, you're going to take down the mother, you're going to kill it just for the horn, and what's funny, Shadow, it's been proven in Asia and all around the world that rhino horn doesn't make doesn't act as an aphrodisiac at all, has no medicinal effects whatsoever, benefits none, but yet they're still poached on a regular basis.
Well.
And Matimba and Little G are two orphans that were left, and they're out in South Africa in this huge sanctuary orphanage where they get to hang out together. But what I can't understand is why they wouldn't just kill the baby. Not that I'm supporting it, but why they would leave the babies right there after they slaughter the mother.
Well, I would think that some deviant mind like that would say, on the off chance that they would grow up and survive, we would have more horns and make more money. That's disgusting. So yeah, I probably think that.
Thank you, because that's something that's bothered me. So like I said, anybody can go to Africam.com and check out and give a big hello to Matimba and Little G. It's kind of cool because I wish I could actually touch, or see what a rhino looks like, because full grown, they're huge.
All right, so thought crimes. Give me a rundown. Give me a rundown on it.
All right, yeah. Thought crimes. The case of the Cannibal Cop 2015 was released April of this year at the Tribeca Film Festival. The director is Aaron Lee Carr. The producer is Andrew Rossi. This was at the Tribeca Film Festival this year, only a couple of months ago. So for listeners, if you Google in quotes thought crimes, even if you're not in the United States, you may not get it on YouTube, where anybody here in the United States can see it, by just putting in thought crimes or thought crimes, the case of the Cannibal Cop, and you can watch the full documentary, and it's a documentary. And knowing we were going to be talking about it, if I may, I just wonder, can I read the 3-sentence bio of what Thought Crimes is about?
Yeah, I also urge people to pause their listening now and watch Thought Crimes before you listen to the rest of the show, because you're probably going to be, not understanding things that we're going to be talking about. But that's up to you. You can listen to the rest of the show without that, or watch it now and then continue. It's up to you. But go ahead, yeah.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate it, because I completely forget that. Yes, it'd be great if you watch Thought Crimes before you listen to us, because then that'll give you a great sense of why, because myself and Shadow, Miss Stefano, a bunch of other friends have watched it, and it truly is amazing. So I'll just read it very quickly. Who's the director? Aaron Lee Carr takes a gritty look into the darkest corner of the human psyche. With exclusive access to ğeberto Valley, that's the cop and his family, Carr challenges our beliefs about the criminal justice system, especially, and this is why Shadow and I are so hot for this documentary, as it applies to the ever-evolving digital platform. When it comes to the internet, how do you draw the line between fantasy and reality? At what point are the desires of a potentially dangerous man criminal, and how do you know when that line has been crossed? And that little bio was authored by Jenna Terranova. So really the documentary, and for those of you, it really brings up, the issues, and Shadow and I have talked about it on previous shows, about, not just thought crimes, but George Orwell, for those of you who've read 1984 and the Thought Police, dystopia, human consciousness, and it really is just, they spend a lot of time, particularly in the second half, when they go into when does fantasy become reality. Yeah. And this is what Shadow and I are going to be talking about tonight. Yeah,
the whole thing is that you, as these law enforcement officials go out there, the drive to do this is to save lives, to save people's lives. So and if something happens or somebody dies, you're always going to blame yourself because you think you could have done more, right? So why can't we stop it before it happened? You know what I mean? But then we get into a legal boundary, and it's hard. It's really hard. Well, we can never know. But I think there's a way we can get around that. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I certainly, I'm hoping we can get around that. And I think if we continue to work, it'll eventually get there. But for those of you, for the listeners who haven't heard about it, essentially the documentary covers a New York City Police Department, NYPD police officer, young man, I think at the time he was 28, in 2012, he got, we'll just say addicted, if not compulsively dependent to a website called darkfetish.net, and got engaged in these internet chats with a chap from Pakistan, one specifically from Britain, and then another dude, I think, from the States, all around, and this is why it's called the Cannibal Cop, about murdering and then cannibalizing and cooking everything that goes with it. And originally, he was arrested, spent time in the county jail down in the city for conspiracy to engage in, kidnapping. He was acquitted. And then from there, it was all about dealing with what's called overt acts and dealing with the whole thing about thought crimes. Essentially, him and these guys would internet chat with each other in darkfetish.net. Let me see. In 2012, he logged into darkfetish.net over 1,000 times. 1,000 times in 1 year. I mean, yes, I probably visit Google more than 1,000 times, but for anybody, that's a lot. And he would go into cyberspace, into darkfetish.net, and engage in online chatting with these fellows and talk about this alleged fantasy about capturing, brutally torturing, murdering, and then cooking up and then eating his victim. He also went out to visit the alleged victim and all this other stuff that went around. And not that it's that bad that he didn't tell his wife, because we understand why, but it was all done, in a deceptive manner. And then the other thing, which he got nailed on, it was a misdemeanor charge for accessing the federal database that police have, all law enforcement has access to. But that's not really what Shadow and I were most interested in. It's all about cyberspace and whether or not cyberspace encourages the fantasy or what people are thinking about to put it into reality.
Yeah, and is it a crime? Is it a crime to sit there and think about this thing? You know what I mean? When you take action, that's what I always apply to the law. You could take action, and if you take action, then you're guilty. But then we're taking it a little bit further, and there's so much gray area here that we don't even know what to do because we want to prevent this. Sit there and think about this thing. You know what I mean? When you take action, that's what I always apply to the law. You could take action, and if you take action, then you're guilty. But then we're taking it a little bit further, and there's so much gray area here that we don't even know what to do because we want to prevent this and we want to save people's lives. But we, we're bound by portions of the law that say we can't arrest people for something that they could do. And then we get into mathematics, and what's the probability? You know what I mean? What if?
It's such heavy stuff to even, but this is the reality of not just now, because we are at the beginning of the information age, but these are going to be issues that, long past you and I, moving on to greener pastures, to where it's going to become a greater issue as it surrounds around freedom of speech, privacy, and, what are you allowed to, disseminate, exchange, and compile from cyberspace? For instance, which is an excellent, which I didn't even think of, but when I did Tammy Stefano's show last week, her producer, the guy on the boards, his name is John, and he had asked me during the show, which I didn't even think about, he said, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it, have you ever heard of Second Life, Shadow? It's by Linden Lab. It's called Second Life.
No, I have not.
Second Life is where you go in and you create your own avatar, and you go into a virtual world, from building houses to going to bars to going to dances to essentially doing whatever you want. And the avatars that you create in Second Life look just like you, but obviously when you create your own full-body avatar, if you're a little overweight, you're not. You're going to have the six-pack abs. You're going to be beautiful.
Sure.
But the way they take your image, your facial image, and you look pretty damn close like yourself, but you're an avatar in this virtual world. Right. So what John asked, which I didn't even think about, is what if? Okay, this is when we get into the what if. CăⱧ Valley, and through this documentary, what if instead of internet, IMing each other in a web chat, what if he did all this and lived out that fantasy in the Second Life, in the virtual world of avatars? Would it make a difference? I mean, it wouldn't be any more illegal because it's only manifestation of fantasy. But when you think about it, it makes it even worse. But it's fantasy, correct?
Well, yeah, it is fantasy. I mean, if it's reciprocated, I mean, if you're role-playing, you know, online with another person and they're into it, you know, otherwise it's stalking, you know.
Well, exactly. But the first question that I wanted to ask you, Shadow, is do you think, and once again, you know the difference between causal and correlative, do you think cyberspace causes people or influences people, and you've got some brilliant ideas around this, related to my fantasies? Now, what dark psychology is, in my construct of dark psychology, not that I'm anything special, is that I believe that within all of us, there's this dark side, which is kind of known, but as we walk through life, we all have these dark thoughts, fantasies that, thank God, stay between our ears. Those who pull the triggers, the pedophiles, the deviants, the violent psychopathological, the psychopaths, it goes from, as you said at the beginning of the show, goes from thought to action, all right? So my question to you, sir, doctor, do you think cyberspace in the information age, does it cause it to come out? How do you see that?
Well, we have to see, you know, there's always been things like this happening before the internet or prior to the internet, so, you know, it doesn't cause them to come out. I mean, but I would say that it's an easier venue, I guess, because you're sitting at home in your comfort zone. So yeah, I mean, it's going to cause people to have a feeling of safety and go out and expose things that they wouldn't normally do. So when you're sitting at your computer, you divulge things. I mean, there's some studies that I read, you know, that people put things in their iPhones and stuff that they wouldn't even tell their sisters or whatever. There's a study done that there's an intimate relationship between, not intimate, you know what I mean, but there's a relationship between a phone and the owner. That's...
Well, and if I may interject, because you are spot on when you say intimate. I mean, for the listeners, most people think intimate means something that is romantic/sexual, but intimacy means direct connection or a close relationship to something else.
Right.
We tend to think it's another person, but you're saying to a device.
Right.
Can you speak on, when you say intimate, what do you mean by that?
Like, if you take a person's phone away, or something like that, there's been studies that people will react in a way that is absurd. There are people that will act in a way and physically assault somebody, or physically hit somebody, or physically hurt somebody if they try to take their phone away from them. They'll punch them, beat them. It's insane. If you simply try to take their devices from them, you know. So
do you think, though, Shadow? I mean, you and I know as well, even though they didn't include it in the DSM-5 this past year, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th revised, which is the Bible for psychologists and psychiatrists, is prior to them publishing it, there were two camps. Those that wanted a diagnostic code and criteria, including internet addiction as a diagnostic code, a real mental illness such as any other behavioral addiction like compulsive gambling or sex addiction.
Well, I would say device addiction even. Device addiction.
Well, then there was the other camp that said, no, it's all bullshit, it shouldn't be included, it's not an addiction. So what they ended up doing in the DSM-5, they put in the back of the book for further study online gaming, internet use gaming disorder, which is internet addiction to online gaming, for further study, which in the DSM, that means maybe down the road, we'll include it in DSM-6 or DSM-5 revised, but they didn't include internet use disorder. So going back to what you're saying, do you think that it's about an internet addiction, or it's something else that's going on inside the human mind and its relationship to cyberspace?
Well, I think they work in tandem. I mean, it's just, if you're addicted to the internet, you got a process going here now, but I feel safe and I can do the things that I want to do, and I feel safe that I'm not going to get caught, or what, you know what I mean, speaking as the deviant, So you're asking me, internet addiction, is that relevant to cyber predators? Well, absolutely. I mean, there's no way to get out of it. Does it intrigue them more? Does it bring them out? I think that cyber criminals and things like that, and deviants, are a lot more tend to use the computer than they would before. Take more risks. Because now they have the whole world open up to them. So
what you're saying is, and this is where, and it's not just a huge big topic for the future generations of information age, particularly when we get into AI, artificial intelligence. Well, that's a whole 3 shows that you can
no kidding.
Do
yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I said no kidding. Artificial intelligence is coming up.
Which is right, which is a machine being able to have its own conscious. And I just finished reading a paper by David Chalmers, who's one of the top philosophers, physics in the world. He wrote a paper a couple of years ago. I'll send it to you on artificial intelligence, the singularity, and what he writes about is that a day will come where we will be able to create a machine, a computer, let's say, that will be able to to think, act, however you want to put that, but essentially have more intellect and more advanced than us humans. Even though we as humans created that machine, well, now you have a machine that's essentially smarter than us, and now you tell that machine to create another machine. So essentially, what he talks about, and it's called the singularity or the information explosion, is that time when we as a society are going to have to deal with that. Because if we can create computers or intelligent machines that are smarter than us, well, then naturally, we're going to ask that intelligent machine to create another intelligent machine, and that's going to be smarter than the intelligent machine, which is smarter than us.
Well, I mean, there's no limits to knowledge. I mean, within your own perception of the universe. So, I mean, it's only as much as you can get. It's only a culmination. When it comes down to it, it's only a culmination of our own self. When it comes down to everything. So it's just us. But one endearing quality, not endearing quality, is that it's not a quality. I strike that. That's one of the worst things about this whole discussion is that we're our own worst enemy. And if we were to develop artificial intelligence, I think they would find that out. I think either they would kill us or either they would, try to eradicate us, because the only solution, because everything that we make, is built to destroy. So it's hard to, that's from, one of my favorite movies. So, everything.
What movie is that, if I may ask?
I can't remember right now.
That's okay. So let me ask you, Shadow, because one of the things I wanted to, and I'm not getting paid for it, and it just recently started, there's a new talk show for those that are interested, and the reason why I bring it up, only because what I've noticed is, for once, thank God, it's a morning talk show here on the East Coast. For me, it's called Security Brief with Paul Vialis. That's Security Brief with Paul Vialis. And it's your typical daytime talk show, like I don't know what your daytime talk shows are now. I don't know who's on now, but what I remember back when I used to watch, like an Oprah or Geraldo or I don't know who's on now. It's certainly not Phil Donahue, but I don't know who but it's a daytime talk show called Security Brief with Paul Vialis. It just recently started, and what's good about that show is that it is the first daytime talk show that is actually starting to include areas of what you and I talk about every day. I don't get to watch it every day here on the East Coast. It comes on at noon. I think on the West Coast, and if you have DirecTV, it comes on at a whole bunch of times. But if you Google Security Brief with mě, you should be able to find it. But what's so intriguing for the first time, and I've done my studies, and you know, in the past, in my past life as a shrink, I did TV and blah, blah, blah. Hopefully that comes around again. What he does is, for instance, he's the first one last week on one of his shows. He covered an entire show on revenge porn, which is a huge issue, and it's revenge porn. That's something we could do a show just on what people will do to one another, you know, because you and I break up or you and I have a fallout, you know, from our business. I now post your ads back when we were in college together, and you were mooning the other fraternity because we're all drunk, and now you put it online for the world to see. Or ex-boyfriends and girlfriends who will, you know, once they break up, they will post images and video of their ex-girlfriend or their ex-wife, so forth and so on, and they put it in public places, public websites, and put their name and then also give their address and contact information.
Right.
That's revenge porn.
Right, yeah, and we see that a lot. You know, we see that, definitely we see that a lot, and that's despicable that people can do that. But there has been some legislation passed, though. There has been some things that are going on in the government to try to you know, come up with some laws against that. So, you know,
yeah, this past week they passed a law that is essentially going to make it illegal. So you got that, and then this week, I'm not sure of the days, because like I said, I don't follow any TV, but I do know that it's either tomorrow. He's doing a show on what they've titled it is cyber extortion, which you and I, or those of us that are in the world of cyber criminal psychology and profile and InfoSec, is called sextortion. So that's a show that they're going to be addressing. But what's impressive about this show and this guy, and I'm not getting any you know, cuts or anything, is that they're actually, for once, somebody is addressing the dark side of cyberspace.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, sextortion, Shadow, you know as well as I, that is awful, what people do to one another.
Sure, you know, it's just another avenue for criminals. The internet is just another avenue for criminals to exploit, you know. And since you a large audience and stuff like that, it compounds the issue exponentially, you know. So, and once again, we come down to the motive, and the real motive hide behind it. It's not really revenge, but sometimes it's revenge. But you come down, you can make it about money because they're going to sell it to, you know, other countries and things like that. You know.
That is one of the big, you know, there is a modus operandi. One of the motivating factors of sextortion is it's one of two things. Either if you don't, you know, take off all your clothes on your webcam and bend over backwards and do all the nasties I tell you, it's either one or two things. I will, one, which you just said, I will sell your image in the webcam clips that I've saved. I will put them on the market. Or two, I will send them to your priest, your teacher, your family, and everybody that cares about you unless you continue doing what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
The worst part of sextortion is, and obviously it occurs between adults, but what is the most heinous of heinous forms of sextortion is when online sexual predators, iPredators, pedophiles do this to children. And that actually, back when I wrote the iPredator construct, I you know, included the case of sextortion with this guy out west called Finkbeiner, who used sextortion with a whole bunch of children, where these kids, they were anywhere from 12 to I think up to 17 now. They finally tagged his ass and got him, thank God. But what he would do is on webcam and then also via web chats and stuff like that, these young boys thought they were talking to a hot 20, 21, 22-year-old lady. You know, and because what he would do is he had the knowledge to present images and knew how to manipulate so that, oh, I can't get to the webcam, but here's an image of me. And he would present to the young boy what the child thought was a hot girl that he was talking to.
Which in essence, which in essence is just social engineering, which comes into.
You.
Okay. Proceed.
Exactly. And then what he would do is he would, tell, because the boy thinks he's talking to a hot blonde, take off your clothes, masturbate, dance for me. Meanwhile, the entire time, Shadow, he's recording everything that the child is doing. And then after a while, he would then come clean, and then he would reveal who he really was, and that's when this extortion plot would actually begin, to where he would say, if you don't do what I tell you, young man, I will send this to your priest, your coach, your family, and everything. And not to get too dark, but he would literally have these children, these boys, Shadow, is to take off all their clothes, dance, masturbate, ejaculate, and then eat their own ejaculate, all on webcam. Which he then recorded, and then he would distribute to his other pedophile, and once again, another form of how sextortion is so closely tied to online child pornography.
Yeah.
And thank God, and this goes back 3-4 years, there was the elder brother, who was, I think at the time 16, the child was 13, the 16-year-old boy, went to the parents, and that's how they ultimately caught this guy, Finkbeiner.
Was it had anything to do with the church?
Nothing at all to do with the church, thank God.
Okay.
But it just speaks to the level, and goes back to when we talk about thought crimes. CăⱧ Valley is in thought crimes. As you'll see when you watch this, it's incredible what he is saying in these internet chats with these guys. And when I think of myself, okay, and I'm willing to say I've had dark thoughts, because I believe we all have dark thoughts. Even Mother Teresa growing up had dark thoughts. It's part of the fabric of the human condition and part of human consciousness. But I certainly, I've thought about it, I've never Googled how to cook a woman.
Well, the problem is here, when you come down to it, if you're talking to somebody who you think is somebody, you can create that image and everything all in your head. That's the problem. You create the perfect scenario by yourself. She's this, and that's the key, to getting these people, and that's how they do it, because they know that there are certain things in psychology that you can send to these people and certain things, and they will create it themselves because they have nothing to go on but a picture. So, where's the personality? Where's this? Where's that? They fill it all in with themselves. They fill it all in with their own personality of what they want, and that makes the fantasy. That makes the fantasy now locked down,
Right. No, that's it. And what's amazing about this documentary, and it's absolutely crazy, they put an expert, the defense, defense, that said that, which even though he got acquitted on everything, but they put a psychiatrist or psychologist, some kind of shrink like myself, on the stand to say, which is ridiculous, that basically what käⱧ Valley was doing, even though he was engaging in this heinous conversation, it served as a coping mechanism for him, and a coping mechanism, for those of you who know what coping, or those of you who are psych students, coping mechanism is defined as something that helps with, my self-esteem, my self-ego, my stress management, a coping mechanism. Now, how ridiculous is that to say, you tell your patient, okay, you're having thoughts of wanting to rape, brutally, torture, and sexualize a child. I know those are your thoughts. Well, why not just go online and Google and research it, and that is your coping mechanism. That'll help prevent you from actually engaging in it in reality.
Well, is that true though? I mean, when it is?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. I don't think it is. The more that you.
Not.
when it becomes thought. It's escalation. First it's a thought, then you see it on the screen, and now I want it to be real. It's all escalation.
The fact that the reason why I bring that up, Shadow, as it relates to this documentary, and once again, you and I are trying our best to understand the human consciousness and its relationship and connection to cyberspace. But for Christ's sake, you're actually going to put on the stand some shrink that's actually, after voir dire, is actually, as an expert, going to say it's a coping mechanism? This is only 2 years ago.
Well, that's horrible. That's horrible. I would never agree with that as a coping mechanism. People are willing to believe. People want to believe just by credentials, and that's the problem. Is that we've become a society that believes in what we see, not what we investigate. We're a society of deceivers. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we are. Deception. That's how we live our lives, and that's ingrained in us.
And in cyberspace, it seems like the level, and as you and I discussed on past shows, deception, and even online deception, is part of, once again, of the human condition, of human consciousness. It's just like, let me give a very reductionistic, simple example. It doesn't have to be a male peacock. What does he do? He spreads those big, beautiful feathers. Why does he do that? Because he's trying to show the female how big and beautiful he is. He's also telling other male peacocks, boy, you better watch it, because I'm a big old peacock. Look at my feathers and how big I am. Even though that's, that is a form of deception. It is sending a message of what he's really not, that male peacock. So deception is part of who we are. But it seems as if in cyberspace, deception it's incredible how pervasive it is.
Well, you only get pervasive when you get good at it, because there's that inherent need that there's the inherent learning curve. They say you went to jail as an honest man, and you come out as a criminal. So that's, you go to the internet, you come out a criminal sometimes, so... maybe the internet's just filtering out all those people that we wouldn't otherwise know who are predators. What do you think of that?
But it's got to be something more, and there still isn't an answer. And you've said, and I've said, and we've talked about it as that. I think it's you who said it actually, but I'm trying to take credit for it. I think I said it. It's in iPredator. Is that cyberspace is acting as an extension of human consciousness, and we see this in the documentary of Thought Crimes. Is this guy, ćeⱧ Valley, although he was acquitted, and it's his right, and it's free, and he wasn't guilty, but to literally sit there and to, communicate with somebody, albeit at darkfetish.net, to sit there to talk to some guy, out in London over and over again, about cannibalizing and cooking and he even talks about, as part of the fantasy, is that once she's cooked up and served, her frozen, severed head is put at the middle of the dinner table with her mouth agape that he can look at while he's eating her flesh.
Well, that's some pretty horrible stuff.
And talking about that with a guy, and by the way, for those of you, because not that I normally watch the credits, but the main guy that he is talking to, because I saw that and I was like, I got to write this down and tell Shadow and his listeners, what was his name? Oh, yes, Moody Blues is who he's talking through most of it. His real name, aka, is Dale Bollinger, and presently, and this is what brings up my next question to you, the guy he was talking to most of the time through the documentary, Moody Blues, his real name is Dale Bollinger. He was arrested, convicted. He's spending 9 years in prison for sexually grooming a child.
Wow.
Yeah. So here we got this dude in London somewhere that ćeⱧ Valley is talking to over and over again about cannibalizing, murder, torture. So you think about this guy, Dale Bollinger, is chilling, hanging out at this darkfetishnet website, and then we see, guy's doing 9 years for grooming a child, so he's a pedophile too. So my question to you, Shadow, you don't know I'm asking this, do you think it's possible that when we engage, and nothing again, through the fantasy and the deviance of the dark side, that it can actually, like in this case with this Dale Bollinger guy, that it can spread into kind of like poison ivy, or when cancer metastasizes, it can spread into other deviants? Because here we got a guy, Dale Bollinger, is talking to Äģe'belta Valley about cannibalizing, torturing, murdering, and cooking up a female, but yet at the same time, he's a pedophile and doing 9 years now for grooming a child. So let me ask you, Shadow, do you think that it can spread to other deviants because I was able to go on? Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm asking the question correctly.
Do I think it can spread to other people? Well,
not to other people, but in my mind, all right, I'm getting off on talking to you about cannibalizing a woman like Äģe'belta Valley. If I do it enough, okay, and I get validation from you, because now you're sitting here saying, yeah, I'm gonna cook her up, what she talks about. Do you think that now opens up different realms of my human consciousness to go into other dark arenas, which obviously Dale Bollinger is doing 9 years for grooming a child, sexually grooming a child. So the question is, do you think, is it possible that by engaging in this, it opens the door to other deviants?
Well, it almost has to, because, as we see a progression of anything, it progresses to other things. So, it almost has to. Unless you have a specific, ideal of what you want to do, if you escalate, it's going to escalate. It is what it is.
Well, but if we look at progression, which, they talk about that, and you can see, Äģe'belta Valley's progression and all this, we just don't know. If he hadn't gotten caught, would it have progressed? There's no way to know that, He got caught in the fantasy stage, okay?
Yeah, so how can we predict if that would have progressed into something real? Yeah, the answer...
Right, and what they say, right, and you're exactly correct, and one of the experts say, which is true, it is next to impossible to predict violence. Obviously there are criteria, there are things that increase probability, proclivity towards violence, but there's no way to accurately predict who's going to be violent, who are going to act upon their deep, darkest thoughts.
That's the question, too, because a lot of people ask, what would you do if you were dying? Well, I don't know what I would do, or if I was there, or something like that. That's the question that people ask a lot of times. What would you do in this situation? Well, I don't know what I'd do in this situation, because I wouldn't know until I was in that situation. See, that's the problem. You don't really know. But yeah, I agree with you. There are some factors that put it up to the point where, more probable than others. Maybe we should have a scale. It's probable. Maybe we should, have them monitored.
Well, that's where your quantitative, skills come into play, because I suck at statistics and math, but so maybe going forward we could work on creating that skill, because that would be invaluable as it relates to the information age. Because you and I have discussed in the past, and it's a no-brainer, is that today we're dealing with cyberspace. What is cyberspace? An artificial, abstract, electronic, digital universe. It's not real. It's an illusion. But we as humans, and we as people, not all of us, but a segment obviously, we perceive it as real.
Yeah, that's hard to get past. As soon as
what's funny is, and I wish we could get Tammy Stefano on the line, because Tammy Stefano was asked to, a friend of hers, I forget, we'll have to ask her, asked her to engage, to become part of Second Life, and she started it and then put it to the side, and she started off dressed in a business suit, and I guess one of her friends, as part part of, I guess, once you go in, said, no, go put on a bikini, you know. So when I started reading about Second Life by Linden Labs and these avatars and these virtual worlds, you know, I started to read and research that there's people who actually start to believe, you know, and their world starts to, Second Life and the avatar essentially becomes not real to them, but it starts to really mess with the human mind and their consciousness to where now, yes, they're real. I'm Michael Nuccitelli, but I'm also Michael Nuccitelli, the hot 28-year-old, you know, avatar in Second Life, and I can't wait till I get home tonight because this hot redhead Shadow, oh man, her and I are going to go out dancing and bowling together. What I'm going to do to her when and the person begins to interpret their reality thinking about an illusion.
Right, because the interesting point that you bring up there is now that he's going out believing that he's this person that he goes online, you know, and meets in life. So there's some disconnect about culpability, you know, or responsibility. So, you know, you come back to, if you get around, well, I didn't do that to her. You know, he did it. You know what I mean? There's some disconnect. So you have this other online personality, you know, that gets ingrained into you, and you know, it reduces the amount of responsibility, at least for somebody to do this crime.
The world of the future, and once again, you and I, we're not fatalists. You know, you and I love information technology. You're InfoSec, I'm cybercrime. You know, but you and I are not saying turn off the internet. We need to go back to the 1950s and live, you know, post WW2. But it just seems as if we, as a society, are not only doing it we're not only behaving in a manner to protect ourselves as an adults, but we're also not teaching children, you know, to be preventative, to practice some form of internet safety in cyberspace.
Well, that goes without saying, because I don't see any studies out there that shows children, but I see a change in society norms. You know, I see a change in how people behave. I see the behavioral change over the years since the technology boom. So.
Yeah, well, and if I may, because there's another excellent point I have written down I wanted to bring up, and, you know, because we talk about, you know, social media, and it's all about what? Getting connected, connection, social, being able to exchange and befriending, you know, hooking up with, you know, people from the past, present, future, meeting new people, all of that can help us. Yeah, okay? But a good friend of mine, his name is Joseph Kundratz, he's watched Thought Crimes twice, and him and I have spent a good 2 hours. I told him everything, you know, that I think, kind of like what we're talking about, and what he brought up is an excellent point, which obviously I can't answer, but he brought up an excellent point of view in that, and this is a question to you, Shadow, is that what he said through Thought Crimes is that once Gilberto Valley, you know, met the Moody Blues and the other two guys that were cool about talking about this heinous act of cannibalizing, that it created the sense for Gilberto Valley validation. And what my buddy Kundratz says is once you find validation from one person, obviously the validation in and of itself, one, makes you feel okay with the deviant thoughts, and then two, makes you perceptually realize that there are others out there who have the same type of deviant fantasies as you, making it okay.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, the human being can rationalize anything in their mind. If there's something that they want, and it comes down to what do you want? What does this person really want? You know, you're talking about this and this and this and that, but when it comes down to it, he just wants to do this, or he or she just wants to do this deceitful act, or this heinous act, you know?
But do you think, Shadow, that the fact that for Gilberto Valley, or anybody that, you know, goes into cyberspace, you know, and has deviant thoughts fantasies, okay, mythologies, Carl Jung kind of stuff, where my buddy Kondrack say, do you think just the fact alone that somebody, said, yeah, let's talk about it, which is validation, once you have that validation that, oh man, this guy's going to talk to me, these couple guys are going to talk to me about killing, torturing, and eating another woman, does that accelerate or now make it okay in my mind?
I don't think it makes it okay or accelerate. I think that you want to, with that whole human grouping thing, or the necessity to belong. Am I lonely? Am I the only one? You find something, that somebody else is interested in, the same thing that you're doing. Yeah, of course it's validation. Of course it validates your thoughts. Like, hey, we think alike. So, hey, I'm not so messed up. It comes back to rationalization, The core problem...
so you're using you said a little bit Freudian psychoanalytic, because rationalization, which I subscribe to, but not all of Freudians, but his defense mechanism, which Sigmund Freud is the one who not only, was able to put into the world the subconscious, unconscious, but came up with defense mechanism, rationalization being one of the biggest defense mechanisms that we use. We can justify anything. We can rationalize the hell out of anything.
We can justify anything, right, but we've been pointed towards the thing. We only have ourselves to blame, because the society that we live in and the things that are around us that are put to our ears and eyes and nose, those are the driving forces that force, I don't even want to say force, but that shape how we become human beings and what we're going to do. So, those facets of our society turn us into killers. So if we take a mirror image and look at the society, that's really, some of what we are. And it goes 50-50, because it's how somebody in their own brain can interpret what they see. Okay? One person can look at a knife and another person can look at a knife, and one sees something to cut, one sees something to cut some meat, and the other sees a murder weapon. It's hard to...
Oh, that's an excellent example. I'm visualizing it now, right. And when you're definitely a Jungian. You're a Jungian disciple, because Carl Jung talked about what you just said, where Carl Jung, God bless him, he was a student of Sigmund Freud, and they got in a big blowout because Carl Jung refused to subscribe to Freud, saying Freud said everything is, all driven by sex and aggression, and Carl Jung came around and said, yeah, sex and aggression is important, but, your buddy there, Alfred Adler, said, social construct is important, but what's most important, according to Carl Jung, was our own interpretations and our own personal mythologies and fantasies that we have can actually, influence what we do as we walk through life. Freud was what you call a hard determinist. By age 6 or 7, you're set. Your brain is set, and that is how you're going to be for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's nonsense. I don't subscribe to that at all. That's nonsense. No way that you're set for the rest of your life. That's horseshit.
Well, thank you. And that's where his, the younger one, Alfred Adler and Carl Jung came along and said, sorry, Sig, yeah. Where Alfred Adler and Carl Jung would be called soft determinists, where they said, yes, early childhood trauma and upbringing is going to affect your development as you walk through life, but you can certainly change and behave differently and not, so they completely disagreed with the hard deterministic standpoint, and, obviously that's been proven. But then again, Siggy was a big-time cokehead.
Yeah.
God bless Sigmund Freud, because we got to give him some, props, because he introduced Shadow, as you know, which didn't exist before Sigmund Freud, was the unconscious. Prior to Sigmund Freud, there was this netherworld, and one of which he wrote, Stone on Cocaine, most of it, is the interpretation of dreams, which Sigmund Freud had said, our dreams and nightmares were essentially our unconscious speaking to our conscious state. So it was Sigmund Freud who introduced to the world, to science, psychiatry, behavioral sciences, this whole idea that there's a portion within our, whether you believe in soul, construct, human, whatever you believe, there's this netherworld that we don't access in a waking state. But when we're asleep, when we dream, it's always going on, the unconscious, and Freud had said it's constantly speaking to us.
I don't know if I believe that. I would have to think scientifically if that was proven, if there's some kind of connections between that. I mean, I would have to see some physical evidence, to believe in something like that. It's hard for me.
I don't think you're correct. I mean, obviously you're correct, Shadow. There's no way to prove that, and there'll never be a way to prove that. I mean, even today, we don't know where is the seat of human consciousness. Some believe, some if they're religious, God bless them. I'm not a religious person. I think I'm spiritual, but some believe, those that are religious, human consciousness is the soul. Okay, which is when you think. I'm sorry?
One thing you have to understand about dreams is a person who has bad dreams and a person who has good dreams. Now, there's two different scenarios going here. Think about it. Who has good dreams? Who always has good dreams and who always has bad dreams? Okay? Now, does the killer have good dreams? Or does the person who has never committed a crime in his life or her life have bad dreams?
Well, I don't know. We'd have to find out. I mean, I do know. What I can say to speak on that is those that have committed atrocious, heinous crimes, once they're convicted and they interview them, they are that get. They're not they're not executed, where they spend the rest of their life in jail. Many of them, even though they've been assessed as psychopathic, many of them report having terrible nightmares about the actual incident or incidents of the maiming, the heinous acts, the torture. Some of them are so psychopathic that they have no fear or emotionality related to the nightmare, so it's not a nightmare. But there are many of them post-acts that they live with these nightmares that are incredibly frightening. But what they then say is, back when they were doing it and leading up to it, in the fantasy of murder and torture, they didn't have nightmares. So that's a whole different area that obviously I'm clueless about when it comes to trying to understand human consciousness as it relates to. Particularly now, but as it relates to thought crime, can I ask you, Shadow, what did you think of the documentary?
Well, it's hard to say. There's a double-edged sword there. It's a very, very hard question to. He didn't do anything. The world we live in, is based on action. You can't be arrested for just typing some words, and that's the bottom line. Right,
and as they talk about that when do we cross the line? I mean, obviously, dystopia or 1984 talks about the thought police, and just the thoughts alone is a crime, which obviously, thoughts cannot be a crime, because what you said is true, is that it isn't until it's action, when thoughts become the action. But if you remember in the documentary, one of the, I don't know if it was Dershowitz or Dr. Wellner brought up, or one of the other experts said, is at what point does it become criminal? So, for instance, with ćeⱧ Valley, let's say he then took those fantasies, and instead of just internet chat, he then packs everything, gets all the equipment to murder, essentially to abduct her, whatever the target victim is, and is starting to put together all, his kill kit, that's BTK, and is on his way over, and he gets stopped. Can he be arrested? And then they pose, well, now he's knocking on the door of the victim. Can he now be arrested and convicted? When is it that the thought that is now action? Because some would say, and this is what the whole documentary started off on, the fact that he's even exchanging this dark, deviant fantasy is an overt act of action. Not that I subscribe to that, but how far would Gilberto Valle have to have gone before you and I, not you and I, but law enforcement would have engaged and said, yes, it's now criminal what he's doing?
The problem,
the
problem is that the law enforcement is black and white. You want to either arrest him or not. There's no gray area for them. Okay, they want to put him in jail, or you don't want to put him in jail. The thing is, they need therapy. They need help. They need to go talk to somebody. They need to talk to somebody about those feelings, about how they feel and things like that. You know, they got to go talk to somebody. They got to seek help. Okay. See, putting them in jail isn't going to solve the problem. They're going to still have those thoughts. You know, before or after they do something, they're still going to have those thoughts. You know, so you're not really helping the person. You've turned the corner here. You know, we have to look at our own consciousness, and we have to come down to it and understand why, you know, we want to do this. Are we out to help our fellow man, or are we out to help law? You know, there's two things. There's a great dichotomy there, because you don't know which you know, host to serve. You know, there's so many things that you can do, and so many people are torn. You know, so
just see, and once again, because I want to ask you another, because it just seems to me, and I may be wrong, I don't know if it's because I spend so much time in the dark side and studying and you know, it just seems as if society as a whole, we are the information age, you know, world. We're at the beginning. It's only 30 years going on, and as I've said, and as you know, it could be around, who knows, centuries until a new age or period of history is created. What that'll be, I don't know. But we're at the beginning of it. So, as it relates to you, okay, particularly being an InfoSec expert,
let me say this real quick, okay? The problem is when you want to do that, you want to interject, you want to do something about thought crimes, it's the guilt, okay? We feel guilty as human beings because we weren't able to prevent it, okay? So let's address the problem. That's the guilt problem, right? We feel guilty because we couldn't save those people, right? So let's address the problem. So are we not only as law enforcement officials, or whoever's law enforcement officials pushing all these policies and everything, thought crimes and all this stuff, are our own worst enemy, because we're pushing all these things into the, you know, into the spotlight, you know, and we're forcing people to choose and do all this stuff. So you see what I mean?
No, I definitely see what you mean. I just hope your listeners understand what you're saying, because what you're saying is very deep stuff.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if you want to elaborate, but I know what you mean, of course.
No, go ahead. Let me hear your interpretation of it.
Well, no, I mean, my interpretation, Shadow, this is our reality, you know, and to me, we are at the beginning of the information age, and I say it over and over again, is that you and I grew up pre-information age. So you and I grew up prior to those. You and I were not enveloped. You and I did not go through puberty with a smartphone, iPhone, iPad in front of us, in our pocket, in school, constantly Snapchat, Instagram, Kick, going on and on. You and I did not grow up to where information technology and all of that stuff, you know, influenced our self-identity, and, you know, that's developmental psychology, you know, had nothing to do with us becoming individuals, which we all go through. Today's children, all of them now are handed, and I talked about this on Tammy's show, is several weeks back, which is the youngest so far, to where a 4-year-old was handed a smartphone, internet-enabled, a 4-year-old.
The bottom line for this, Doc, the bottom line for this is we as human beings cannot accept the reality that there are bad people and things are going to happen. And as much science as we do, as much as we learn, there may be no way to predict or save everybody. The problem is we feel guilty when we don't, because we're human beings. We're compassionate. The good people know. And the good people push these policies. They push the policies. They push the policies. You know, we push these policies to thought crimes. We put innocent people in jail. We have to take a look at what we're doing. You know, putting these people in jail, things like that, doing this because we're creating those people, or even, you know, triggering them, or making it worse. You understand?
Yeah, I mean, yes, of course I understand. You know, like, for instance, the recent spree killing, and God bless, you know, all the victims and their families, you know, from the South Carolina spree killing, you know, but the stepmother of the killer, I forget his name for crying out loud, you think I'd know it, you know, recently disclosed that she said it was the internet that made him evil. The internet made him evil. You know, I would love to sit down and ask her what she meant from that, but that is what she is quoted saying, the internet made him evil. That is what kicks up for me, because we are in the information age. What does she mean by that?
Without a case history, I wouldn't know. I would love to have the case history, you know, how he grew up and things like that, because it also comes down to the reductionist question of people, if they are born inherently evil, or do they learn it from the society. So that's what we come, you know, that's what we come down to then. So was he a good guy before he got on the internet, and as soon as he got on the internet, made him a bad guy? You know, come on.
Internet made him evil. I mean, that's what. So, if I may, and it's not changing, but let me ask you, Shadow, because I haven't asked you in some time, and for your InfoSec, you know, followers, have you, you know, working in InfoSec and all the research and studies and the council, have you over the last, you know, 3 to 5 years, have you, in the world and industry of InfoSec, I know that's different than what we're talking about, but with information security, the industry thereof, have you noticed any changes or anything that's changed with what InfoSec is focused on or doing, or has it been pretty much, you know, status quo?
No, it's just, well, the only difference that I see in this is not people who don't understand the technology are getting the good jobs. You know, people who don't understand the technology are getting the jobs that should be for senior people, you know, because there's a lot more influence and there's a lot more damage you can do without looking at the whole picture. And as you get older, you start to think that way. You start to think globally rather than small. So you put these people into these higher positions to save money. Corporations will do that to, you know, hire entry-level grads, you know, just to save a bit of money and fire and lay off the long-term people, or I'm sorry, but the people who are there for a long time, you know, senior levels, to save money.
Right. So it's all about the almighty dollar.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. And that's exactly what it comes down to with anything. I mean, we've created a society where people are willing to take a life for a piece of paper, and when you put that down on the table, you've convinced people to take a life. I mean, if you put that in context for a second, for just a piece of paper, people are convinced it means so much to them. People will kill for it. Are you kidding me? That's what they've created.
No, you're just making me. It's incredible to think what you just said. But every now and then you'll say these things that, to me personally, the back or somewhere in the frontal lobe just explodes with, you know, starts racing to think, you know. Not that you're in a pulpit somewhere, but that's why I think you're brilliant, and I'm not getting paid by Shadow to say that, because I do think that. But from an InfoSec standpoint, you know all the typologies of iPredator, but would you say still presently InfoSec is still focused on, deals mostly with cybercrime?
It's starting to turn around a little bit. There's people who don't know. People coming into the industry who don't know. They have to know, you know, how people think if you want to get into this thing, because it's only, all the code is just an extension of our way to design. Object-oriented programming as a programmer, is how we would lay things down as memory maps and things like that. It's just, code is just an extension of how our thoughts are patterned. I mean, not to get too deep into it, but when we write code, it's just an extension. It just feels right. It's hard to explain because it's how we would encode a memory anagram, if we were to say,
But do you think for the typical, community citizen, do you think information security, very basic information security skills, knowledge, awareness thereof, do you think that act can act as an internet safety, cyber attack prevention mechanism? Basically, normal folks, Shadow, obviously not nearly as advanced when you're talking coding and pen testing, but do you think the normal community citizen, if they were to learn basic, very perfunctory basic skills in InfoSec, could that act as a form of protection?
A protection inherent to, absolutely, to identity theft and a lot of other problems going into the technology and cyberspace industry. Yeah, absolutely. If you just learn some quick topics, because it's something you never had to worry about before, numbers and all this stuff that's stored on the computer. You never had to worry about that, but now you do. So absolutely, if they use some basic ideas of what do's and don'ts, of what to do, what not to do, who to give your information.
Well, if we have time, Shadow, and not to disclose, if we have time, can you give a couple of do's and don'ts for your listeners that are not InfoSec experts?
Absolutely. When you send your email, use encryption. When you store your files on your computer, encrypt them. Don't take pictures of yourself and put on the internet. Don't put your thoughts on the internet. Don't put, everything that you put on the internet is captured. And the whole machine of the internet, Google, everything else, is built up a profile to sell things to you. That's all, the whole thing is just set up in a way such that it can aggregate with these, billions of calculations per second with one thing in mind, and that's to make revenue. So you have this whole giant world thing of a machine going 24 hours a day, seeing everything that you do, how long you stay on a page, if you clicked here, if you clicked there, what you like, what you bought, what you purchased. GPS is tracking where you go, where you shop. There's no getting out of it.
And that's only going to become more enveloping, correct? As time goes on,
more enveloping.
Grand machine.
Yeah, you have to stop and you have to say, hey, wait a minute. I like my technology, but as humans, and it comes back to the exploitation of the have and the have-nots, because this technology is a great thing, but apparently.
Well, let me ask you, Shadow, because once you upload this to YouTube, I have 3 or 4 moms I want to send this to, and they are single moms. They are working their ass off. They've got kids. Can you describe or explain to these moms and those listeners out there, what is encryption?
Encryption is taking information and scrambling it up so nobody else can read it in a way such that it's virtually impossible to get without the password.
All right, so would that mom, would she have to call you to say, how do I do it? What would she do? Is that considered? I know that's novice for you, Shadow, but in your cohorts. But what can that mom do when you say encryption? What is that?
Well, you have to create an awareness, because that's not what, and this is exactly why we're doing the show. You have to create an awareness because people just don't know. People assume that their stuff is safe. It's just an automatic assumption. That's how we've been programmed as human beings by media, that we are programmed, and I'm using my phone, it's safe, and if I see a picture of a little yellow security or a lock, I feel secure. If I could put, it would be an interesting psychological experiment to put, 2 computers side by side, they're exactly the same, put personal information in one, but the only difference between one is that one has a little yellow lock on the bottom right-hand side of the browser, and the other one doesn't. Who would be more apt to put in, you know, their personal information? But understand, it's the same machine. There's no difference between them, right?
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm just making sure that the moms that are going to get this, I'm trying to think like that mom's like, okay, I understand. So you're saying that for right now, that mom, because that's how I'm always thinking is the mom, you know, that's trying to understand. You're saying the first step is awareness, which is essentially knowing that encryption exists, it can be achieved, and it's even thinking about wanting to encrypt my information.
Keeping your information safe, I think, is the full thing. I don't think people grasp, really, who are not in the IT industry, what IT is. I don't think like the run-of-the-mill, the run-of-the-mill, whatever, who has a regular job, who doesn't work in the IT industry, doesn't really have the idea, like a coal miner, would have no idea about what is available on the internet or computers and things like that. There's just no way he would know. So you have to let everybody know that the information is out there. It's you have to protect it, and there are steps that you have to protect it.
Right, okay, but can a mom just, like, say, I know everything is, but can a mom Google encryption and within the course of an hour or so not only understand what encryption is, but then to go about encrypting whatever she has to encrypt her information? Or are there steps, and this is why I believe InfoSec should generalize itself, but are you saying that once I'm a mom, I have the awareness, I want to encrypt, now what?
Well, see, that's the problem there, because now a lot of the encryption documentation is more techy or more tech savvy. So, most people just give up because they don't want the hassle. Most people are like, oh, well, forget it. I just give up, because it's too much, it's too much. People don't want to take the time to learn anything new. They don't want to take the time they want instant gratification. Instant. I want it now. I don't want to work for it. And that's what we've become as a society. I don't want to read a book. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. So, why, if, I got to learn something new. Well, it's your security. It's your privacy. Well, we've been tailored to point and click, and we get it right now. So why would I read a book, to learn about technology, to save my information? Why can't I just click a big button that turns this whole screen green and says I'm protected?
I'm sorry. I just thought of myself clicking that big button and then all of a sudden, everything's fixed. You're protected. Everything's encrypted. Just a button. Boop.
Yeah.
So essentially that's in line to what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that mom, though, obviously they could call or they could, an InfoSec professional or expert to get help. Obviously they'd have to pay for it. But they could use you and or your 9,000 members to encrypt, to learn and or encrypt their information.
Yeah, it all comes down to the person. You know what I mean? If you're gonna be, if you want to give in to everything that you've been taught by the media and everything, there's people that will. There's people that just don't want any change or will go with the flow. There's people that don't want to learn anything new. They don't, the information, I'm not doing anything wrong, so they can have my information, whatever. There's people who are going to do that. And there are people who will fight for to keep it that way because they want that way. And we come into the problem, It all comes down to you.
Can I ask you, as it relates to encryption, going back to thought crimes, because essentially, as for those who watched the documentary, the wife, the way she found out that her husband, Gilberto, was engaging in all this nonsense is that she purchased the keylogger software.
Right.
Right. Keylogger software is just software that allows me, if I suspect my husband or wife or whoever child is engaging in nefarious, deceptive online practices, I can purchase a keylogger software that'll essentially print out and let me know all information exchanged, compiled, disseminated of whoever I'm trying to check out?
Yeah, everything that's typed on the keyboard is logged. Keyloggers, that's what they do. So,
that's what they do. Okay. So in this, I almost feel like I'm interviewing you, but your information is so vital, and people need. So you gave us a do, Dr. Shadow. What would be a don't?
What would be a don't?
Yeah, you said there's do's and don'ts. You know, and one of the do's is to encrypt your information. And what would be one don't, you think?
Well, don't go try to get free things on the like free programs and things, because that's where all the viruses come from. You know, and this comes back to what again? Money. So, you know, I would love to develop pages. You know, I'm a guy, I want to be a photographer, but I don't have $900 to spend for Adobe. I'm going to go to a crack site and get a crack to crack Adobe so I can get a serial key, so I can run it on my Windows machine. And what are you doing? You're distributing malware now. We don't know where that malware came from. We don't know where that virus came from. We don't know who wrote it. We don't know what country it came from. But we want that instant gratification. We want it now, We don't have enough money to get it, but we want it now. So.
And do you think iPredators know that, Shadow? Do you think that they know that, the target, the consumer, however you want to define it, the online user, is that type of, that people want it now? Because it always fascinates me, all the stuff that gets sent to, like, my email. Click on this, click on that, get this for free. And I don't click on anything, because I know, studying all these things, you never click on stuff from, if it's not from somebody you trust, you never click on anything. So, but do you think that I guess it's a law of probability. So if you're sending that out to 100,000, online users, you can plan on at least 15 to 20 of them clicking on it.
Well, you can deal with probabilities, but, come down to the receptive people, Of those receptive people, you were asking me if they are conscious that they are going to be susceptible, right?
Right.
Are they conscious? See, I think the problem is that we've been programmed to by society, too. I don't even think some of these people are conscious that they're doing this stuff. I don't even think consciously they know. I think we've been programmed so much with money that people would just do this, They'll just go on and do this, manipulating and everything, too, because it's the accept practice, it's deception. We come down from deception. This whole world, our civilization is built on deception, all that stuff, false flags. We've been programmed to deceive. And look at it,
It's absolutely incredible. So before I bring up, how much time do we have left, Shadow?
About 20 minutes.
Okay. So one of the things I sent you, you already knew about it anyway, but, I spent a lot of time trying to think about, in a relationship to human consciousness, is called, for your listeners, is to Google reality, virtuality, continuum. Okay? Reality, virtuality, continuum, and spend 15, 20 minutes, obviously more if you find it interesting. But reality, virtuality, continuum originally was a technology term, which is now, it's moved into the study and understanding of human behavior, the behavioral sciences, and kind of like what Shadow and I talk a lot about. Reality, virtuality continuum is this continuum where on one side you have reality, is the real world, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. And then you have virtuality, which is cyberspace, the second life, all of that. And then in between you have what's called augmented reality and mixed reality. And what the reality, virtuality continuum speaks to is kind of like what we see in thought crimes, is to where people somewhere in this continuum, hopefully most of us, are towards the reality side. But for those people that are psychopathological, either have psychiatric illness, they're psychopathic, they have deviance, they're criminal, to where for some of them, not all, but for some of them, to where they're along the lines towards the virtuality to where their perceptual world and the way they interpret the reality is via a virtual understanding. The reality-virtuality continuum. So one of the things for the listeners, and even if you're InfoSec, because I predict that this is only going to become more integral to all of us in Internet safety and InfoSec, is the reality-virtuality continuum. So for instance, when you watch Thought Crimes, one of the things I couldn't stop thinking about is the reality-virtuality continuum, and where was ćeⱧæ Valley? You know, I mean, he says, you know, that it was all a fantasy, but yet, for crying out loud, he accessed Dark Fetish Net 1,000 times in 2012. Then he even went to meet the alleged, in his fantasy, the victim that he was going to murder, kill, and eat. And then what's most interesting is, as you know, Shadow, when most of us go on vacation, whether it's ourselves or our families, when we come back from vacation, what do? First things we do, we come home, we unpack, we get situated, we reacclimate to from our vacation. Well, what does ćeⱧæ Valley do? He comes home from his vacation.
Looks on
from
the,
Maryland.
yeah.
First thing he does is gets on the internet to communicate, to talk about, you know, that he was there.
Right.
And that he met her. You know, so to me, in terms of the reality-virtuality continuum, I couldn't stop thinking about that whole piece, which is, as the director, you know, Miss Cart talked about, is that area, that gray area between, you know, when does it start to, you know, change? When does my fantasy start to become reality? And for me, I don't think it's causal, but, and I know this sounds crazy, and I introduced it on Tammy's show last week, and please, listeners, don't think I'm crazy, where Shadow and I have said that we think, and it's all theoretical mumbo-jumbo, there's no way, is that we think that maybe cyberspace is an extension of human consciousness. My next step is, I think, and Shadow, you may think, I think in a very rudimentary, very primitive way, just like the neurons in the brain communicate to each other. You got that little synapse, you know, that little space. And there's, what do they estimate, with neuronal connections, anywhere between 1.2 and 1.3 trillion listeners, neuronal connections among the 100 billion neurons in our brain. There's 1.2, 1.3 trillion these little spaces, and they talk to each other, each neuron. What I'm wondering, I know this sounds crazy, Shadow, is that, one, if we think that it's an extension of human consciousness, theoretically, is it also possible then that cyberspace, in a very primitive way, is communicating to us?
How about this? How about we simplify that a little bit? Maybe it's just to see how far he can get without getting caught. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to see how far I can push it. I'm going to see how far I can push the boundary. And that's what...
Oh, no, but I agree. No, that's included. But it has to be, Shadow, and there is no answer right now, and hopefully someday we can, you know, it's more than just the veil of anonymity. It's more than just I can do it because I can do it. You know, my wife's not there, the police aren't watching, so I can express and, you know, I can spew and communicate and do, you know, and engage in my dark side. There's something more than just because I can.
No, I want to see how far. No, I want to see how far I can get. That urge. I know what you're saying. There's an urge that they have. There's some kind of urge that they need filled. There's something that would satisfy them. Okay.
Because for me, Shadow, when I sit here and I do this day in and day out, and I really talk about this, but you know this, is that there are times, like I will spend, you know, I do this every day, and it only happens rarely, and I don't know if it's a hypnagogic state, which is, for those of you who don't know, hypnagogia is just before you fall asleep. That is where they feel dreaming begins, and where people have saw UFO and ghosts. It happens during the hypnagogic state. That's the best way to describe it. But there are times, Shadow, where I will get up, and let's say I have to go grocery shopping, okay, to where the first 5 to 7 minutes that I get up from cyberspace, the computer, I am not Michael Nuccitelli. And I'm not psychiatric. I'm not mentally ill. I am not psychopath. But I am not myself. I'm not deluded. I'm not dissociated to a point where I'm somewhere else. But I can feel something different. And then it fades, and then I go on, and then I'm back into reality again. Oh, God, bills, what am I going to get at the grocery store? Gas, blah, 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 blah. I've noticed that, but I keep going back to is that if you take a picture of the neuronal connections in the brain, okay, you put it black and white, and then you take a picture of the internet and all its connections, the digital universe we call it, or they also call it the what? The new term, the digital nervous system. You take the brain, you put those pictures side by side, they look exactly the same.
Yeah, maybe they do.
And then you take the next step, and we can easily conclude what what created the internet, which was a combination of Carl Jung, collective unconscious, a multitude of human brains coming together to create what we now call cyberspace in the internet.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny that they are remarkably not only similar in structure, but similar in terms of communication? And they're already beginning to talk about it, where the only difference is the brain, communicates between neurons electrically and chemically. Well, the internet doesn't communicate, between digital, doesn't connect chemically, but certainly does electrically.
Well, you have to understand that human need to procreate, we want to have something in our own image. So, you know what I mean? We do that with religion, and people do that with religion, talk about that stuff. So we always want to try to create, so we have that inherent instinct, or perhaps something else, that we want to create something in our own image. So maybe we do that without even knowing. So because we always have a tendency to want to, keep ourselves going and live forever, so.
Well, and this is where I get to this whole place where I start to think, and everything for me is, obviously the first construct I address, and having my forensic background, is dark psychology. iPredator, which is now the next construct, as you know, deals with not the, dark side of human consciousness, but the information age dark side of human consciousness, and trying to understand, for God's sakes, it's almost as if, and I'm saying as if, is somehow cyberspace is circumventing and surpassing our frontal lobes, our ability to reason and rationalize, and going straight to the hippocampus and the amygdala. And we know the brain, with the 1.2 trillion neuronal connections, is through mapping neuronal imagery, there's these pathways, just like the highways and routes and connections, and, go over the brain.
You can even simplify that. Because we're sitting at home. We feel safe in our homes. When it comes down to it, it's not that complicated. You're sitting in your home, and you feel safe. That's what it comes down to. That's the bottom line. That's why. That's what.
That's the bottom line. In what way? So what you're saying is because of I have a sense of safety and security. What does that mean?
That means that I can go online and I can do all this stuff. I'll go online and I can do it.
So on the converse, do you think that's actually a good point, Shadow? I've never thought about that. It's funny that we're doing a radio show, but yet you and I are talking. So do you think on the converse of that, because one of the things, and you helped me, I want to give you, a contribution to, which is a subtenet of iPredator called odor. Offline distress dictates online response, which is my offline life and how I perceive my offline world. If I'm discouraged, angry, depressed, whatever, it's going to have an influence how I behave in cyberspace. But given what you just said, this sense of safety and security, which I've never thought about, if we go with that line of reason, now I am a potential target. Do you think then maybe that's why my natural instinct for self-preservation, self-protection, that guard kind of goes down?
Absolutely. We feel at home and we feel safe. We feel at home and we feel safe, so we take off our armor. We're willing, and with our need and our want and our yearning to communicate with other people and belong, it's this whole perfect storm. You know, they've created the perfect storm to, you know, control people. When it comes down to it, too, it's just another control mechanism.
A control mechanism. That's very insightful. I'll have to think about what you said, because that is pretty incredible, particularly as I'm relating to thought crimes, because, you know, I go back and I think, and, you know, obviously if I was able to have the opportunity to interview chéⱧ Valley, I know, of course, he would say it stayed fantasy, that it would have never progressed beyond the fantasy, but as you watch the documentary, it went beyond fantasy. I mean, him accessing, you know, the police database, and then him going, you know, so it went beyond just fantasy. But
yeah,
the question is
it would be almost guaranteed. I would almost guarantee that if nobody stopped him, he would have done it. It's, you know, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have done it. It's all about how far. It's all about how far these guys can get. You know, how far they can get, and they know that. And most of them are smart. Most of them get away. You know, most of them get away with it for a time. You know. So. Yeah,
there's a young lady. Her name is Laura Penny in the documentary who talks about it, and and it's very powerful. What she says is that, you know, she essentially says what people are presenting, disseminating, aggregating in cyberspace, you know, is more than just fantasy. And essentially, she didn't say this, but I do believe that what I am doing, or anybody, what I am, you know, disseminating, exchanging, and compiling, I believe that if you were to somehow keylog all of that stuff, okay, that you would be able to, you Shadow, or somebody, hopefully someday in behavioral science, would be able to give a profile of me and or an online user.
Absolutely.
Without doing any psych testing.
Yeah, absolutely. I could develop a mathematical construct by the way you talk. Yeah. By the way that you type online. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's
so she you know, she didn't say that specifically, but what shrinks used to have, they still use, and I used to do it in some of the forensic evaluations, called the Rorschach ink blot test, which those of you, the Rorschach ink blot test is you look at a series of ink blots and you tell the evaluator what you think it is.
Right.
Oh, I think it looks like a bat. And then you look at a series of 20 or so ink blots, and then, you know, the evaluator, whoever's giving you the Rorschach, you know, it's a projective test, and then at the end, he takes whatever your responses are, and then he makes a supposition based on all your responses.
Yeah.
That was called the Rorschach. But what you just said, and what Laura Penny was talking about, I believe that. I believe you would be able to, or myself, or somebody someday, would be able to take all the data, whether exchanged, disseminated, or exchanged in cyberspace, however that is, and be able to make a pretty good estimate about a person's personality construct.
Yeah, but the problem is that we don't want to. We can't handle it if we're wrong, and that's true. There will be too much guilt for anyone to handle, and that's what it comes down to if we're wrong.
Right.
Because you never want to put an innocent man or have an innocent person suffer. So.
That is true. That is true. I apologize for the pause. I know you're not supposed to do that on radio. It's just that you got me thinking.
I know.
So I'm assuming we're at the end.
Yeah, we're about at 154. So that's that was a really great segment there for an almost 2-hour show. So this is a hard hitting show, and I think that a lot of people are going to be interested to listen to this. So.
Well, thank you for having me
final
on.
Thoughts. Let's just give final thoughts here.
Well, final thoughts is my final thoughts is, as it relates to thought crimes in this documentary, rightfully so, he shouldn't have spent any time in jail. It didn't, yes, he should have gotten a misdemeanor for accessing the database. But in the big picture, to me, this documentary is valuable to me, not so much about the specifics, but how they talk about, how within the information age where we are living and going forward for the rest of our lives, all of us, is our fantasies becoming reality in cyberspace. And obviously, most importantly, good fantasies, we have nothing to worry about. It's the bad, deviant, dark, and heinous fantasies that does cyberspace encourage or tempt us. Come into my parlor, the spider said to the fly. Remember we talked?
Yeah.
The converse. It's thinking about that. So that's my final thought. But thank you for asking.
My final thought about this is, I was just giving my opinion. Just my opinion. Should he have been arrested or not? No, you can't until the act. You can't do somebody for you can't arrest somebody for having a thought or thinking about things, because we think about things all the time. We think about some dastardly things, but we never act on them. So, I mean, when it comes down to reality, no, you can't arrest somebody for thinking. It's just, you can't. End of story. Now, if he went out to see her, yeah, was he stalking her? Yeah, charge him with stalking. But should he spend any time in jail? No. Could he commit a crime? Yes. Could he kill somebody? Yes. You just have to accept that. That's in the nature of the human being. And all those people are going to argue out there, you just want the perfect solution. You have to accept that there is no perfect solution. There is no prediction. There is no pill that you can take that's going to predict this kind of behavior. You have to rationalize.
Excellent. You
have to rationalize your guilt, with right and wrong. What's right, and would you feel guilty if you were wrong? And nobody wants to take the responsibility for putting an innocent man in jail. Okay, but that's an interesting dichotomy, because look at the states we live in. We don't want to put somebody in jail for doing this and doing that, but yet we're putting people in jail for smoking a little bit of weed.
Right, exactly.
We are killing people and putting them in jail for smoking a little bit of something that grows out of the earth. And I'm not a weed fanatic or anything like that. I don't even smoke, grass or anything like that. But look at that. You know what I mean? I mean, look how messed up our society is. You put people in jail for like the size of your thumb of a plant.
It's ridiculous. Well, this goes to, and that's all shown in of itself is, which I'm more and more starting to believe, that the correctional system is so bloated and fat, it needs to thin itself out. But then I'm starting to entertain the idea that the correctional system, wants it to stay that way, because what does it do? It generates revenue. We
absolutely know that. And on that note, I definitely gonna end the show, because we all know what the prison system is. We all know what it is. We all know there's people that suffer in there, and we all know there's people. And for those people out there who are paying their taxes and everything and doing their lives and never committed a crime, I understand. You're doing great. But if you've never been in jail, or you've never seen how people are treated, you really need to wake up.
And that being said, sir, thank you, and thank you to your listeners, and hopefully your InfoSec members will find this a relevant show and hopefully educational. So thank you, Shadow, for having me on.
Alrighty then, we're gonna move on now. This is Shadow Radio. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is Shadow Radio. We have that final 2-hour interview. I hope you didn't pet your cat to death there and drink all your Jolt Cola soda, but 2 hours of hard-hitting stuff. And just like I said as a reminder in the beginning of the show was recorded prior to the New York Stock Exchange fall. So just keep that in mind as we're talking about this information security stuff. And I hear our outro music coming in. So to everyone, enjoy the show. Like I said, don't be too upset that we didn't follow the same scenario and the news, but we had to get this out in an important, because perhaps some big things may be happening with Shadow Radio and Dr. Nuccitelli in the future. This is Shadow saying adios. Enjoy the show.